It seems like every supplement company now has an electrolyte. And from a business standpoint, this makes a lot of sense because they're pumping out cheap powders with random ratios of electrolytes and calling it a hydration supplement. This is where Protekt's different because their hydration supplement is more convenient, absorbs faster, and mimics the exact ratio of electrolytes lost in sweat. So it gets the job done with precision and not guesswork. So while other supplement companies are adding electrolytes to make quick and easy money, Protekt has decided to put their full focus into it. And I'm not going to lie, the fact that they're a 100% American-made, veteran-owned company also adds a lot of value. So if you want a world-class hydration supplement from a company who specializes in it, go to protekt.com/truth. Today, I'm joined by my friend and peer, Sullivan, better known as the Fight Dietitian, who works with some of the greatest athletes in combat sports. And Jordy doesn't just help fighters make weight, but he helps them make weight and then perform at their very best. Jordy's joined me and others as part of a new wave of practitioners in the weight cut space who bring real science to a world that used to be dominated by myths and extreme practices. And Jordy's built a name for himself, blending this evidence-based science with the realities of a fight camp. That's travel, training, crazy schedules, and the stress of fight week. Today, we dive into what it really takes to fuel a fighter, some of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to weight cutting, and where we see the future of combat sports and nutrition heading. But before we get started, I wanted to leave you with a quick tip powered by Tuft & Needle. Daily creatine use may help support better sleep, and when you know you're going to go through a period of really bad sleep, higher doses may be beneficial to mitigate some of the side effects of poor sleep. That normal daily dose is around 5 grams, and the higher dose has been shown to be around 20 to 35 grams. Now let's jump into the episode with Jordy. All right, so welcome, Jordy. Long time coming. I think we've done podcasts together before. We've traveled overseas and worked cards together before, but I'm really excited to have you on because, as I've mentioned on other podcasts, I do think the evidence-based circle when it comes to weight cutting is a very small circle. And you are one of the people in that. So just to kind of jump right into a question that I have never really asked you, and I've been curious, and that's, you're the Fight Dietitian, so you could have niched in anything. Why specifically did you choose to niche in fighting? Because we all know there are far easier athletes to work with.
Yeah, good question. I'll give you the elevator pitch with it so I don't bore your audience with the 20-minute story of it. Essentially, when I finished my master's degree in nutrition, like every good 21-year-old, I didn't want to commit to working full-time, and so I ran overseas. But my intention going through a nutrition education was never to be a nutritionist or a dietitian. I was in pre-medical school, so I wanted to be a doctor. And I wanted to get into endocrinology and I wanted to study hormones. And that was the goal. And then I had a complete breakdown, which is ridiculous looking back on it now in my 30s for a 21-year-old to have a breakdown about that. But I didn't want to work. I wasn't loving the field and I ran off to Canada. And I think giving myself that freedom and being out of the hospital space, and I worked in hospitals for about 5 years prior to that, and being over there and being exposed to, say, the college sporting system and the sports supplement world, it gave me this sense of freedom that like, oh, this is actually quite fun. This is quite interesting. And when you weren't so restrained by certain structures that I was over here, I went, man, I could really see myself doing that. But also at the time I was traveling and having a lot of fun. I thought that was a really important part because I went straight from high school to university. So I've got to give myself the freedom to have a bit of fun. So really for the first time in my adult life, I was dead broke. And then what I was doing to kind of keep my mojo, as most young fighters do, is that I was training full-time at the gym. I'd go do jiu-jitsu class in the morning, go do boxing in the afternoon, and then I'd go work at a pub in the evenings. And that was kind of my life. And then as I was working, and you know, when you're in the gym, this was the first time in this point in my life that I was training while I had my qualification. So all of the conversations that I wanted to avoid back in when I didn't have this qualification in the gym, I was now having, and that was with my teammates going, you know what do we do about this making weight? And I was thinking, you know what? I have no good answers for you. I've got 2 degrees. I've got an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in this, and I honestly don't know what to tell you. And then I really started self-experimenting with it. And I remember the first decent weight cut I put myself through. I went 25 pounds in 8 weeks, which isn't super crazy, but for someone who has no idea, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was horrible. And that whole experience was very enlightening. I went keto and did all this stupid stuff and put myself in a bath for too long. And that really opened my eyes to it. And it just made me think, man, there's got to be people doing it. And that led me to finding out other people such as yourself, who was still active in the field at the time, other guys like Mike Dolce, who you've had on, and then started researching. And yeah, that's really what the genesis was to get started with TFD.
So that's cool, because one common thread that I find with myself, yourself, and Charles specifically, and I'll say that because, again, me and Charles talked about you on our podcast, and Dolce as well, since we're all kind of talking about each other here. The common thread is past experience cutting weight. And oftentimes, well, actually all 4 times, past experience cutting weight in the wrong way. I mean, I almost died from a weight cut. Charles almost died from a weight cut. You had, tough times during weight cuts. Dolce used to cut weight all the wrong way. And despite the knowledge we have, the same thing here, Master of Science, Human Nutrition, Registered Dietitian, I don't learn anything about weight cutting or performance nutrition in that. I can do a feeding tube calculation, which is great if that's what you want to do. But honestly, what I learned most was from the mistakes of that. But I do think it's cool that you first wanted to get into endocrinology, because there is a lot of carryover from that into what we do. And I'm just curious, what do you think you've learned or knew about endocrinology that's helped, or maybe even you've learned it since, in the field of actually working with fighters through weight cuts?
Yeah, endocrinology maybe not as specific. Absolutely, there's crossover, and I think when we're looking at REDS and looking at these hormone profiles, absolutely. I think more the systems physiology, the biology, the organic chem, and the anatomy helped me a lot when I got into weight cutting, because, like you said, you can get a Masters of Human Nutrition, go into this arena and have no idea what you're looking at, because it's a real gray area, right? And we've spoken about this. You, me, Charles, Mike, we've all spoken about is who puts their hands up and takes accountability for this, because it's a weird field where, okay, the dietitian's leading the fight camp nutrition, right, and bringing the weight descent down. But then when it gets to the weight cut, the dietitian's in there, but really it should be a sports doctor, but a sports doctor doesn't want to touch it. But then there's the paramedicine team. Say if something goes wrong, they're on call. But no one really wants to own up and put their hand up and say, I want this, because it's such a full-on experience. And I really do believe having that prior experience and doing those extra anatomy classes, the systems spheres, the organic chemistry, that at the time you don't love, right? Like, it's a lot of extra work and you're going, what's going on? Fighting and I guess weight cutting was a way for me to merge that nutrition world with that extra knowledge that I got from that pre-medicine study. And I thought that was very interesting, especially when you're talking about the final weight cut, when you're talking about the body going through and you're going through these severe stages of hyperhydration, and then what's happening in the blood chemistry, what's going on to the organs as they get extremely hyperhydrated. How do you rehydrate someone? What are the systems that are affected to that? What happens to the renal system? What happens to the liver system? All of those things. And I think having that knowledge really made me look at this and go, oh, I don't think anyone's really come in a good way and put a good system that combines all of those areas. Everyone was kind of looking at it with, okay, we'll go nutrition, and maybe there's an input from a doctor that has no idea about what's going on. And like you said, collectively, I think there was a few of us who could come in and look at it and go, we've gone through it. We know at this point your heart is going crazy. You can't really see. But maybe the nutritionist didn't understand what those symptoms really meant from a systems physiology point of view. And by going through it, you can then go, oh, okay, I think I can extrapolate what that means. And now that I understand it, we can treat it and prevent it and make sure it doesn't go to a point where it gets really, really bad.
Yeah, and you mentioned REDS, which is relative energy deficit in sport, which happens from prolonged low energy availability, which is essentially prolonged time you're not getting enough energy input, calorie input to support your daily tasks, what you're asking your body to do. And talk a little bit about how prevalent that is in our sport, and detail a little bit about how we've seen that and how you would take an athlete and help them recover from that and get out of that so they can then begin to cut weight properly and perform as they should.
Yeah, so a couple of things to go over with REDS. So REDS has been a concept that's been around in sports nutrition, I'd say 10 years, and it's probably the one that's most highly debated. I think, and you'd probably agree with this, Tyler, not that I flip-flop on this, I think being in the combat sports world has definitely changed my opinion on it. I think the original group that came out with the REDS concept, the IOC, absolutely well-intentioned. I think the concept is great. What it's really specific for, it's a concept to be able to give a system where we can give a quantifiable point of saying, okay, at this point, you will experience negative symptoms from being in a prolonged energy deficit. And when you look at the equation for how we work out energy availability, so we go energy intake minus the energy expended from exercise divided by fat-free mass. Now, as anyone else knows, we have lots of different ways that we're going to expend energy. We've got a basal metabolic rate, we've got the thermic digestion of food, we've got NEAT. But what this system is specifically trying to look at is in athletes, after Tyler does his workout, with those calories being accounted for, does he have enough energy for the rest of those physiological systems to thrive? Not just survive, can he thrive? And then, as you alluded to, when we're with these combat sport athletes, we're often cutting so much weight. We're cutting, up to 15 to 20% of their body weight in 8 to 10 weeks. So in order for you to do that and mobilize that body fat, you have to change the energy status of the body and go into negative energy balance, which consequently means you go into these very acute phases of what we call relative energy deficiency. Whether or not in this period of time it is quote unquote chronic enough to cause these negative outcomes, we don't quite know. And there's some really interesting research that's come out from Liverpool John Moores. And as you know, and we've spoken about this, Carl Evans' study on the Taekwondo athlete, very, very interesting, where he completed the Within Daily Energy Balance study, where he looked at this and he said, this is the worst study I've ever done in my life, because me saying that equation, energy availability equals energy intake minus what you burn during exercise divided by your fat-free mass. In theory, that sounds, we could work that out. Tyler, just tell me how much you ate. Okay, well, how accurate was that? What's your diet recall? Did you track all of that? Okay, one. So we've got some ambiguity there. And I go, hey, Tyler, how much did you burn in your workout? And you go, oh man, I don't, well, my watch says this, or my strap says this, or this. And you go, well, how accurate's that? And then you go, oh, okay, well, we've got a bit of ambiguity there as well. And then we go, okay, we've got to divide by fat-free mass. And I go, well, Tyler, what's your body fat percentage? You go, oh, I haven't got a scan lately, but I kind of look at myself and you go, oh, okay. So straight away, you can appreciate that there's some ambiguity on how we get these numbers. And Carl really dialed that in and said, I just tracked this kid for 8-week prep. It was getting ready for a European national title. And the very interesting thing that he found that, and don't quote me on exact numbers, I could pull up the study, but I'm sure we'll link it and you guys can get the exact numbers. It was something like he lost 9.6 kilos over the 8 weeks, including the final weight cut. And what was really interesting from that study is they found when they calculated what the difference was every single day between what he was eating, what he was burning, in order for him to get down to that weight, he went in what was called a within daily energy balance totally. So his total energy availability state, he was at minus 100,000 calories. So in order for him to get down to that weight across that 7-week fight camp, he had to go under what his body needed by 100,000 calories. And so straight away, you can appreciate, okay, if we're talking about adequate energy availability, is having enough calories in there, not only just to survive, but to thrive. Now we're $100,000 in the ditch in this banking system. That's a pretty big debt on the credit card. Things are going to start going wrong in theory. But the crazy thing was, what the research team found is that at this point of going into fight week, they really didn't see the debt collectors coming and saying, hey, Tyler, pay your bills. What was happening is that they theorized in that 7 weeks, it wasn't long enough, considering that they properly periodized their intake. They followed what we call the 3-2-1 principle, which in your and my world is God's gospel, essentially, where we go, okay, 3 grams per kilogram of carbs, 2 grams per kilogram of protein, 1 gram per kilogram of fat. You periodize this carbohydrate intake throughout the week. You make sure that, yes, you're putting them in a deficit to get to this weight, but you're not going crazy deficit, 100,000. Maybe most fighters were going 200,000. And what they worked out was that if you can do that, at least for this 7-week period, it doesn't seem to be as bad on the body as what we once thought. Obviously not ideal. We're not saying do it for too long, but it wasn't until they put them through this final fight week and they dropped those calories even further, and they went down to 1,200 calories a day. So he was averaging about 1,800 calories in those 7 weeks, went down to 1,200 calories. That's when they started seeing all of these classic symptoms of RED-S. They saw insulin resistance was increasing, testosterone dropped, cortisol rise, thyroid hormone decrease, resting metabolic rate decrease. Their ability to go do their exercise metabolism testing just went down because they were so fatigued. That's when they found it, which suggests to me and the people listening, although we don't know all the fine details of this relative energy deficiency equation, we don't know what point this happens. What it suggests to me, and what's useful for everyone to know, is that for every single person, you probably have an individual quantifiable point where this starts happening. For fighters, we can then look at this and go, okay, maybe if you do it right, you can get away with a fight camp. But if you do it really wrong, something's going to go wrong. Or if you're someone listening to this and you constantly are going on diets trying to lose weight, and you're seeing that you're having these points where you're going, I'm really fatigued, my libido's down, my indigestion's really bad, my mentality, my mood, my anxiety's getting really bad, that's probably a point where you're experiencing this relative energy deficiency. And even though you may be more resistant to it, Tyler, or Sally over here might be even less resistant, all of us have one point where this occurs. And even though we can't yet say this is the exact point, we do know that the concept holds true, and we can see, okay, at some point this does happen.
Eating high quality, delicious meals when you don't have a kitchen available is virtually impossible, but Essential Provisions has the solution. Their shelf-stable meals go beyond organic and are made without any of the sketchy ingredients we all need to avoid. And somehow they've done so while also being some of the best tasting food you will ever eat. So whether you're on the road, in the woods, or on the trails, Essential Provisions has you covered with food that will support your performance, health, and your taste buds. Use the link in the show notes to save 10% now. Half-Face Blades makes 100% American-made knives for the world's best military operators, hunters, and chefs, people who need knives to make a living or stay alive. That's why I trust them with my own everyday carry knife. So if things like buying American and high performance matter to you, head over to halffaceblades.com and throw away your cheap gas station knives. Yeah, and I think you avoid that by, one, reducing the amount of weight you have to lose, and how many times a week or how many times a year you fight if you have a big weight cut. Because that's one thing I've seen, fighters that maybe they're Johnny on the spot when the UFC comes calling, but they also have big weight cuts. They make weight, but by that third or fourth weight cut in the year, they're suffering. So I do think there's a lot of merit to the fact that we can reduce that from happening by, again, not cutting so much and not doing it so often, which is a little unfortunate, because to really make money in this sport, if you're not a champion or Conor McGregor, you have to fight often. So yeah. There's a lot of fighters I've had conversations with. I'm like, hey, do you want to fight more often? Like, well, yeah, I'd love to. Go up a weight class. Like you really might want to try that, because if we can reduce the stress and impact on your body from losing so much weight, then we can recover a lot better. As you know, a lot of fighters will actually go up in weight and their walking weight will become less than the walking weight that they were at when they were cutting more weight, because they don't have that scarcity mindset where they're eating everything in sight right after. And I think their metabolism's had a chance to heal a bit. Have you seen that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that study, a big part of it was trying to say, why does this happen? Why do we get this rebound hyperphagia, which means is a fancy scientific way of saying, why do I eat every freaking thing in sight after I go through these big calorie deficits? And it just intuitively makes sense, right? If you're in the debt to your body for 100,000 calories, and then you go through this period, and then all of a sudden I say, hey, Tyler, don't have to diet anymore. You can eat whatever you want. There's going to be a physiological drive to retrieve those calories, right? And that's what they saw. I know in the report, and when Carl talks about it, this athlete, he went out and he would state, hey, I just came to and I was standing at the cupboard and I had a Mars bar in my hand. I don't even remember getting up off the couch and coming here. But because his body had such a strong drive to recover those calories, we think that can explain why fighters have such a big drive after the fight to want to recover this, and they get so big. And another thing that they found in the study is this person recovered their weight within 5 to 7 days. It was within the 5 to 7 days they had consumed 130 or 140,000 calories. But what seems to happen when you put that weight back on so fast is that you don't, even though you came down in your body fat and hopefully you maintain most of your muscle, you're still going to lose a little bit of your muscle, 10 to 30% of whatever you lose, probably from your muscle mass. What we see is that you tend to put on the muscle mass a lot slower than what you do the body fat, which means when you put those calories back in and the weight comes back up, all of a sudden you go back to that weight or a little bit higher, but your body composition is likely changed, where you've put on a little bit more body fat and you've lost a little bit more muscle mass. It might not seem like a lot, but maybe if you're doing this 3-4 times a year and then you're collectively doing this over a 3-4 year period, is that the reason why we see these fighters, like you said, hey, this weight is getting really, really tough to make, even though I'm kind of around the same weight class, I'm doing everything the same. Are these small changes each time you rebound back out, are they making enough of a physiological difference that is making the next cut just that little bit harder? And is that why we see fighters tend to go up in weight classes as they get older and do more weight cuts?
Do you think maybe the reduction in muscle mass, is it from the fact that it's so much tissue that has to be created and it's harder to do that with muscle mass? Or is it because the macronutrients they're choosing? Because most fighters and people in general, when they start binging, they're not binging lean protein. Is it because of a reduction in the macronutrient of choice? They're not getting enough protein, especially relative to what they need. And they're also seeing a huge reduction in resistance training, or jiu-jitsu and wrestling by themselves are resistance training. So do you think that reduction in muscle is coming from that, or is it something different?
Yeah, I think probably a little from column A. Absolutely, there's not much of a stimulus coming in for hypertrophy and building muscle, and it's really tough. Like you said, it's tough to build muscle. You've got to have a really good stimulus for it. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't think anyone's, as soon as they finish a fight camp and finish a fight, is going, hey, I want to go get a lean Greek yogurt, some beef jerky, and some walnuts to binge out on. I don't think that's happening. They're going straight to In and Out, just going here. And then after they finish In and Out, they're going, you know what, I'm going to go to Wendy's and get a shake. And then the next day, it just rolls over. And I don't think the macros are too favorable for lean muscle.
Or any level of performance for that matter. Do you feel, because I know you work with other athletes too, do you feel like fighters are more, I don't know, resistant to data-driven information than other athletes? Because in my experience, I find that very much so, at least in America.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'll give you an example. So yeah, we work with lots of different athletes. So say we do a lot with the ultra endurance space where guys will go out and they'll run for days and days on end. Those guys very much data driven, and I believe they're so data driven because there's no way to get through that sport without that data. You can't get through it without it. You can't go for a run for 3-4 days in the mountain and not fuel your body properly, because at one point you will fail. Everything will shut down and you will fail. So you have to have a degree of data to run on. You may not have it completely dialed, but you've got to have a degree. Then I look at the other end. Let's say we work with some pretty high level jockeys horse racing, where they've got to do what fighters do 3 times a week, where they're manipulating weight, say a Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. And they've got to make weight, maintain it all day. And they've kind of got to go through a fight camp, then a little fight week, and then make weight all within a 2-day period. And so for those guys, they've got to be extremely data driven, because they, again, cannot do their job unless they make the weight, and them making weight is how they make money. Fighters sit in this funny in between where there's an 8-week fight camp, and then between fight camps, they might be fighting as little as 1 time a year or maybe 3 times a year. But even if they're fighting 3 times a year, there's still a decent break between. So I feel like there's enough time where you can get away with it without it being completely data driven. Maybe that's why we see that some of these fighters always get to a point before they call someone like you, me, Charles, Mike, before we come in, where they've just been able to get away with it because they've got enough time to do it. And what I think happens is, like I was speaking about earlier, everyone has a point where it goes bad. Our job essentially is to find the very limit of that point. Tyler, how can I get you on weight, feeding you the most, where it's absolutely not favorable in a long-term sense, but I can get you on weight with putting the least amount of stress on your body? Or alternatively, Tyler, you can just eat a can of tuna every single day. There's some calories coming in and you can train the house down. The weight will come off and you'll make weight. My approach with you and your approach with that, we both make weight. One of them puts a lot less stress on your body, one puts a lot more. I think fighters probably have enough of a time frame where they can get away doing that, and it doesn't have to be as dialed in. That's why we tend to see, oh, something has to go wrong before they'll be calling someone in, and to use a data-driven approach.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is the fact that it is such a cultural issue, and this culture is in the entire gym. So we look at like my NFL clients. They hire me, but then they also have sports medicine doctors. They also have sports performance specialists in-house. Or part of the team. They have all these other people giving them this information. And for fighters, really the only person who's probably giving them any level of this type of info, sports science, actual data information, is someone like us, because their boxing coach is not doing it. Their wrestling coach sure as heck isn't doing it. So I do think a lot of it is the bubble that fighters exist in. It's kind of like an echo chamber of bad cultural habits within their gym is a big part of that issue. And that makes me wonder, I'm sure you've seen that. And I do know in Australia, you have a very, very good in with, what's the gym name again?
City Kickboxing.
City Kickboxing, where they have like full trust in you. They bring you in and it's like a team effort to make sure that everybody is doing what they need to according to your plan. And that's unheard of in America. But maybe from other teams, have there been moments where you've gotten pushback from coaches? And if so, what did you do to kind of educate the coach and get them to relax so you can just come in and be the practitioner that you needed to be?
Oh yeah, that's our entire job for the most part. There's absolutely physiology, but most of it is psychology, right? And trying to convince these guys that yes, this does work. It's a big problem, like you said. It's a cultural problem. People, you can have all the science and you can say this is going to make it work, but if for the last 30 years of this coach's life they've done something the one way and you're trying to tell them no, there's a better way to do this. I always think it's like telling someone who's driven a car, like a stick manual shift, for their entire life, and then coming in and we live on different parts of the world, and the gearbox, you're sitting on the other side of the car and it's completely backwards. So imagine if I come over, Tyler, and I go, no, actually it's better to do the gearbox the opposite way and doing this with your opposite hand. Like, you'd go, no, I'm perfectly fine driving this car this way. And so I feel like that's what we're trying to do. Even if the car I have is much better, it's a Ferrari, it's oiled up, whatever, it's just more comfortable for you. And I think what you really have to do, and I've thought about this for years and years, because education is important. Don't get me wrong. You can go in, you can do seminars, you can educate the coach, you can educate the senior athletes, you can educate the younger athletes, the other guys in the team. What you really need to do is put your money where your mouth is and show them that it works. And the way that you do that is demonstrating it with the athletes. And what I've found over the years with the gyms is the coach is responsible for the entire team. So, and especially once you get these bigger level teams, everyone's coming at them with an idea that we can make this better. And there's lots of people who are just trying to sell all sorts. I've seen so many weird things go through CKB over the years, being like, take this potion, do this, blah, 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 and whatever. But what you really need to do is show, hey, this system ultimately gets the results, which is winning in the cage. And that's definitely the way we went about it at CKB is, yeah, making weight is the one thing you can get on the scale. When I started with Kai over there, my whole goal was, yeah, I can make this weight cut easier for you, but I need to educate you enough, Kai, so that you can explain this process and then you can talk to the other people in the team. I felt so good in the cage, not depleting so aggressively during camp, opting for the I'm going to fuel and really push this envelope, as opposed to just having the can of tuna every single day. I could rock up to training. My recovery was better. When it got to the fight week, the weight flew off. But ultimately, when I walked into the cage, I felt so much better. I felt fueled, I felt focused, and that got me a better result. What does every single fighter want to do? They want to win. And so if you can do something that is giving them a result, a direct result, that's going to have an impact on the gym. And fighters are cliquey. Like, you'll see this. Fighters, as funny as fighters are, they're very cliquey. If something's working for one of them, all of them will want to do it. And I think I realized that very early on. And again, that can be abused in some instances, and there's plenty of cases where that is abused in this world and any other sporting world. But with what we do, that can be a very powerful tool. And I made a real point, okay, if I've got these top level fighters, not only do I need to be doing a good job with them, I need to be doing good enough job through the education, why we're doing it. I need them to understand why they're doing this. When Kai or Israel or Dan or Volk, someone pulls out this meal after a workout and they're eating it, another fighter sees and goes, why are you doing that? They understand enough to say, I am doing this because of X, Y, and Z. And then that sparks the interest in that. And if you get enough fighters in the gym asking about this and going, hey, Israel's doing this, Hooker's doing this, Volk's doing that, Carlos is doing this, what's going on? The coach is going to start paying attention. And then ultimately, if the coach is seeing that these guys are winning and they're going, hey, man, like I used to walk these guys to the scale and they look like absolute zombies. And now they're having a conversation with me. They're rehydrating. We're going out to dinner and it's actually fun. They're not just spewing for hours and rolling around, holding their tummies in bed. This is really cool. What's going on? And that's how you can get the buy. That's how I found you get the buy-in with these coaches is you need to show them proof, hey, this works. And to do that, you need some willing participants with the fighters.
Now, in my own practice, I've done seminars, and when I'm introducing myself, I'll talk about I have a Master of Science in Human Nutrition. I'm a registered dietitian and nutritionist, and none of that matters. What's going to matter to you is I'm a former professional fighter. I'm a BJJ black belt. Like, because I know that to the fighter, to the wrestler, they could care less about the initials. They really don't care about that. The credentials don't matter. The experience is what matters. And getting that buy-in, you need that. You know, it goes a long way. And I can think back to a time I was working with an athlete and Ben Askren was present for the weight cut. And Ben did not like the way I was managing this weight cut because Ben's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. How do wrestlers make weight? They get hot and they work out. That's the wrestler's way. And again, Ben's one of the best ever to do it. And I have this fighter cutting weight in a hot tub, which, as we know, is the best way. I mean, it's a lot more passive, but that was new to him. And this was like his early days. I don't even know if he had fought in the UFC yet, honestly, but he was livid that I was putting this fighter in hot water rather than having them in the hallway running. And I stepped out to go grab, my thermometer went out. So I went to go get my second thermometer, and which always have an extra thermometer on hand, guys, if you're a coach doing this. And as I'm coming back, I see this fighter still like soaking wet from the hot tub, wrapped in plastics, running up and down the hallway. What are you doing? Or like, Ben made me get out. Like, oh no, this is Ben Askren. Like, how do I approach this? Because I also want to be respectful and not sick. Again, it's Ben Askren. Like, I don't want to, make him mad to the point he wants to grapple or anything. So I'm like, man, what can I do? And I'm sitting here racking my brain. They're like, Chell Sonnen. Text Chell. I'm like, Chell, I need you to talk to Ben Askren right now and tell him that he needs to listen and just trust me. Because I know if I would have said, Ben, I'm this, and this, and Ben's like, I don't care. I'm Ben Askren. And he would have the right to do that. Chell sends a text or makes a call. I'm not even sure which one. It all changed. The minute that Chell Sonnen told Ben, hey, you need to listen to this guy. He knows what he's talking about. He's going to help your fighter. Completely different attitude. Ben's like, oh, okay. And at that point, helped me with the process. And all it took was a fighter that he greatly respects that I've worked with to then come forward and tell him that he should listen to me for him to listen to me. And I've always thought about that because it was such a strange moment for me because, again, I was a wrestler. So for me, it's like, man, how do I sit here and tell this legend that he is going to mess this weight cut up? But again, I didn't have to do it because I was able to get that buy-in. But on that note, if you had a magic eraser and you could erase one bad habit that fighters make in a weight cut, what would that habit be?
Cranking the sauna really, really hot. And lots of fighters still do it. And I'm sure we see it. We see it a lot at the UFC PI. And I know the guys are aware of it. And the only reason this occurs, and it's not because Charles or Glenn or any of the guys over there aren't aware of it. I think when you're at the PI, they're dealing with so many different teams that, like you said, your teams are very educated about it. We've put a lot of effort in educating the Australian New Zealand team. Charles has educated so many teams. Mike's educated so many teams. There's still a lot of teams that aren't educated though. And
Yeah.
I remember taking into that sauna where it's just unnecessarily hot, like unnecessarily hot. They'll have it at 90 degrees Celsius, which is what, like 140 or something Fahrenheit, something crazy like that. And it's full of people as well. So it's like not only is it crazy hot, it's packed full of people. So you're getting hot air being generated from the actual sauna itself, and then all the bodies in there. And I remember, I think I was with Volk and Dan Hooker going into this sauna, and these guys were sitting in there for 45 minutes, I'd say. And you would see one of the coaches would be dragging people out by their legs. These guys are looking like zombies just coming out, being dragged, and then just getting fanned off and then wrapped up. I'm like, that is not someone who like rolling over, spewing. I'm like, that's definitely overheating. That's not what we want. And I would take Volk and Dan in there, and we'd be in there. I'd go, okay, this temperature is way too hot. You're obviously checking the sweat rate and everything. It took maybe 6 minutes to get to the point where I'm like, we're well and truly good enough. We're hot enough, and then we'd be out. And then we'd just go wrap. And we were done our entire process probably 4 times faster than what these guys were. And they're just purely because they were overheating. That is still one of the biggest problems I see in this. Sitting in a sauna that is way too hot and it's completely unnecessary. Just erase that. I feel like on the dial, we should be able to take a magic eraser and just erase the top third of it and just keep it to the bottom 2/3.
Yeah, and I was getting ready to say, and the thing is, your fighter, as I know, because the same thing here, is at the bottom, chilling out. You're probably like rubbing ice on their head or have like a cold rag once they break the sweat, and they're sitting here looking at you like you just ruined the entire thing. I've made the joke before. I've had fighters, especially at the PI, and we've been going towards the sauna, and I see a Brazilian team walk in. I'm like, oh no. we're gonna struggle. And it's not that, because it's just culturally so much more normal for Brazilians. They're like, this isn't that hot, and we have like Americans, our tolerance for heat is way lower, way down there. So I'm like, let's maybe not cut weight at the same time as the Brazilians who are used to these levels of heat. But no, I'm with you on that. The other one that I would personally, if I had to erase any one, it's hard because I've seen so many stupid things. I've seen fighters cut sodium all camp. Like, and now, as me and Charles talked about, you and I and Charles have had these discussions, we don't even cut sodium out completely anymore. You have people doing it all camp, and the standard used to be to completely eliminate during fight week. I don't eliminate it fight week anymore. I know you don't completely eliminate it fight week. That's something new that we know that we don't need to do. I don't even really know. I think the one thing I've changed the most, I had this conversation with someone recently who's, I don't want to say newer, but newer than myself in the industry. They posted a video talking about what they would and wouldn't do in a weight cut. And they were very against working out to cut weight. And my response was, why? Why are you against this? Because personally, I'm fine with a fighter going and working that weight off. One, if it's what they've always done, I'm going to come in and just make it better. Two, we're feeding them adequate energy enough to do this. And three, they're already at a safe enough weight to where we don't have to worry about that so much. Are you good with that too? I know I've seen your fighters working out. How do you feel about fighters working the weight off?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I've flip-flopped on this over the years, and I've gone from no, active is not good to passive is best. And yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I think working out is fine, and I recommend it pretty highly now. And the reason I do that is because I highly appreciate if you do the fight week properly and you're feeding these guys at maintenance like you should be, you you respect that they're not going to go in there like it's their last sparring session or their last fight sim and really push at 110%. It's not going to happen. They're going to be working at 30, 40%. We know just from a bioenergetics standpoint, they're not going to be in a position where their body's screaming for lots of carbohydrates. They're probably on an exercise bike, keeping their heart rate quite low. If they're hitting pads, they're hitting pads pretty softly. Grappling up and down can be a bit complicated if you can get orthostatic hypertension if you're a little bit depleted. Other than that, I'm pretty for it. And the big reason for it is that you can manage body temperature a lot better through exercise. If you're sitting in a bath or sauna, you've got a constant heat source and it's external. I always use the example, if you're cooking a turkey from in an oven, you're cooking that turkey by putting the heat and it's going from the outside in. When you produce heat exercising, it's from your muscles from the inside out. And that's why our core body temperature goes out. So a really easy way to just stop getting hot is to stop working out. So even if you put sweats on and you limit the amount that evaporative cooling that will cool you down, Tyler, you go, hey, Geordie, you're sweating too much. You're looking too hot. Just go sit in the corner. And then all of a sudden, the source of heat goes away. Your body will start cooling down quite rapidly. It's a pretty easy way to manage the overheating side of it. Yes, you've got the side of energy where I might not feel great because I haven't had carbohydrates, but we shouldn't be at a point where my body is fully reliant on carbohydrates up at that top end exercise. We should be going pretty easy. I should just be tip, tap, and pads. You don't have to do that much to get the body sweating. I don't mind exercise. All of my guys, we will always exercise on the Thursday night if we're doing the double and doing the Thursday night and then going into the morning. And the reason we don't do it Friday morning is just culturally, we've just always done a bath. So they're just mentally, and you know what it's like. Don't change it. If it's working really well for these guys, there's a whole mental side of this where we just want to sit in the bath. But I'm not completely against exercising. The reason I flip-flop on it is you see a lot of the Russian, the Dagestani athletes, even the Chinese athletes are big proponents of it. And I used to sit back when I was younger and go, that's ridiculous. And now I sit back knowing a bit more and going, I understand it. If it's done properly within these parameters, I'm pretty fine with it.
Yeah. And again, it's properly. So I think back to times, if you've not flip-flopped on something, you've not been doing this long enough, or you just suck at this. You're not going to be good at it. I very much am convinced of that. And we both have known people in the past that were, no, has to be this way. You have to talk the fighter into this. No, I'm not going to sit here and try to tell Daniel Cormier that he needs to change the way he's been cutting weight since high school. So that was kind of my first time working with someone who wanted to work a lot of the weight off. And dude, especially my first camp with Daniel Cormier versus John Jones 2, it just fell off. We woke up on weight and we get in a sauna. He has this entire system and he was just very upfront. He's like, hey, you're here to keep me safe. You're here to give me advice and make this a better system, but this is the system. Okay. Like I thought I was here, and this is my early days. Like I thought I was here to tell you have to do a bath and you have to do all these different things. Not at all. And he just point blank told me what it was. And now I've found out that is what it is. That is the job. It's not to change everything. It's to change the things that might be damaging. But beyond that, it's to improve what they're doing. Daniel Cormier, for instance, will get in the sauna. He starts off with just like underwear. And then there's a whole team. We're in there with like speakers. Everyone's like dancing. Just it's a wild, wild event. And at intervals, someone has a job. Someone's putting the sweats on him. Someone's putting a sauna suit on him. Someone's putting gloves on him. Someone's putting a headgear or a beanie. Someone's putting socks. And then we get out. We're not staying in the sauna during that time. So as he's explaining to me that we're putting all this stuff on, I'm like, okay, I'm about to have to have the first time where I tell you, no, we can't really do that. He's like, nah, once we get all that on, we get out of the sauna. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm cool with that. We head straight to the treadmill. And then we're going to very fast walk or slow jog on the treadmill. I want to say it's like 30 minutes. DC's the king of the grind. That's what his nickname is for a reason. It's nothing for him. He just gets on there and he's just moving kind of slow and steady for 30 minutes. And dude, it is a faucet. Like the amount of water that's running off of him is insane. And he's fine. I mean, he's listening to music or talking to teammates and holy smokes. And then I remember he said, hey, once the sweat reaches here on my sweatpants, we're on weight. What are you talking about? Again, he's been doing it this way since high school. He knows so much about his body and this system that when the sweat hits a certain part, he's on weight. Sure enough, the sweat hits that, he's on weight. And that was the first time I really had to kind of sit back and say, man, like, maybe I shouldn't try to change so many things to these like legends who have been doing this so long, so successfully. And people can say what they want about times DC struggled with weight in the past, but those weren't issues with that system. So we saw that again, Max Holloway. worked with Max the first time. He's like, hey, I like to work out to lose the weight. He goes, I also need carbs all week. I'm like, whoa, like that's strange. But then I had to step back and say, honestly, that makes sense. If he's working the weight off, he does need carbs during the week. And nobody was doing that. That wasn't a thing. And Max isn't a science guy. Max surely is a nutrition guy, but that is bro science, which I hate when that term's used negatively all the time, because a lot of bro science is just science, the science of knowing your body so well that you don't necessarily need data to confirm that bias. You just have success as the bias. And Max knew that if he got enough carbs during the week and he works out during that weight cut, he's going to make weight. And it happened every time. So have you personally had any moments where you actually learned something from a fighter that surprised you? And what were those?
Oh, always, always. I absolutely feel that elite level athletes are always 10 years ahead of the science, easily. And segueing into a different sport, cycling, I think, is the best example of this. If you look at the Tour de France winners, and we talk about, and this is a little segue and I'll bring it back, is that this high carb revolution, say, where we would have went through school saying 60 grams of carbs per hour, 90 grams. These guys are now pushing 150, 200 grams, and we're seeing them win the Tour de France, which is one of the most impressive athletic feats in all of sports. And then we're seeing people going, okay, what's going on here? And we're looking back and going, okay, if we set up these studies, or you know what, if we actually feed bodies and go, okay, 90 grams of carbs versus 120 grams, yes, you're going to be more efficient at breaking down and oxidizing 90 grams versus 120 grams. And say you only oxidize, say, 80% of the 120 grams, but you're oxidizing 87% of the 90. Overall, you're getting more absolute energy from the higher doses. And that is a good example of, okay, these cyclists don't know that. They're not thinking about, okay, what's the oxidation pathways of all this? They just know when I eat more of this food, I can get up this hill faster and I feel better and I am going to win. And then the science comes in and tries to explain it. And that's exactly to your point. The person I've learned the most from when it comes to weight cutting is Alex Volkanovski. And I still learn things and I still tweak our system. Even last fight that he had against Diego Lopez in Miami with our water loading protocol. Volk even said, because we collect so much data, we have every number. So he wakes up, same as you, same as Charles. They can wake up and say, on this date, at this fight camp, 7 years ago, you were this weight and we had this and blah, blah, blah. And 2 years ago, we had this. And they go, okay, that's great to know. He changed his water loading protocol where a lot of people just reduced down. He said, you know what? I feel like I need to introduce a lot more fluid. I need to get really, really hydrated and drink way more than what we normally do. And then I'll flush it out and then let's reduce back down. I was like, okay, let's give it a go. And then he just texted me all morning. He's going, man, I feel so much better. This is good. Like that weight, I'm weighing myself every hour and I'm seeing how this water is coming out of my body. It's coming out. He goes, I think we're onto something here. This is really good. I go, yeah, weird. Like you just totally came up with that. I'm going to steal that and then spread it to the world. Like I did come up with it, but I just learned it from you. And there's so many times where Volk has sat down and gone, you know what? Like, what about we try it this way? Because we're just taking feedback, like you said, of him knowing his body. Another good example of that, you know, when you put someone in the bath, say it's 104 Fahrenheit, 41 degrees, you know, everyone knows the chicken dance that someone does when they try to get from outside in the cool room. They're not warm yet. And then they go in the bath and they do the chicken dance getting in. Volk has always been adamant. Okay, no, I want to be in the bath as it's warming up, which makes perfect sense, right? Like it makes absolute perfect sense. You slowly bring your core body temperature up with the temperature of the bath. And then you go, at least early when you're being really rigid and going, this is the system that I've learned and I've used with lots of people. You know, we keep you out here so you're not exposed to the heat for any longer than you need to be. So you just get in once it's hot. Volk was always adamant. No, I want to sit in here. And it makes perfect sense. I look at it now years later and go, yeah, no, that is definitely best practice. Let your body slowly heat up. But Volk knew it because this is what feels good for my body. This is what gets me. And then later on, the science comes back and goes, oh, okay, that's why this is working. And then they're just two examples of probably 100 things I've learned from that guy. And then, you know, going, I know this works, and now I've got to go back and explain it with science. And almost 99 out of those 100 times, I go, yeah, he's absolutely right. That's correct.
Yeah, I've worked twice with Kevin Lee, really, really easy, good weight cuts. And it's a guy who has a history of having tough weight cuts. And both times I worked with him, we made weight pretty darn easily. And both times it was the same thing. I remember the first time he told me what he normally gets in the water at. He's like, dude, I normally get it at like 107, 108. It's like, whoa, first off, that's way too hot, way too hot. How do you even do that? It's like, oh, I don't really feel it by the time it gets there. Like, what do you mean? It's like, well, I get in there when it's like lukewarm bath water, and then we just keep cranking it up and we start the timer once it hits that number. That makes too much sense. Same kind of thing. And I'm like, well, that's how he's able to take 108 degrees. He's going to think 104 is just a cakewalk. So yeah, same type thing. And it's weird. I saw myself or found myself flip-flopping on so many different things as I've put more skin in the game. And I do think that's a big problem, I would say controversially, with the medical world in general. If we have data, that's all we care about. Like, nope, this is what the data says. We can't argue that. Like, I don't know, because there's this guy who has successfully done something that the data doesn't show for a really long time. So how do we not at least take that into consideration? And I do think that's one thing people need to understand is a lot of times the information presented in the form of research and evidence is the evidence we have right now, based off the studies that have been funded and carried out and done right now. But that could look way different in a few years. And it's up to us to know as practitioners where we just have the evidence base from a data and research point, and the evidence base from experience from the fighter and what they've seen. And I think that's an important thing. And on that topic, what do you think weight cutting and nutrition will look like in the next 5 to 10 years for fighters?
I had this conversation not too long ago, actually, within our team, and we were talking about it. I think what we're going to see is weight cuts will get smaller. I think the overall prevailing thought that cutting more is better is going to be diminished. What I think is going to happen is fighters will continue to progress. I think this is the natural progression of sports science. Like, you think of what fighting was like 30 years ago when it started in the UFC started compared to what it is now. Same with, say, American football or NFL. If you think of that 50 years ago compared to the athletes now, chalk and cheese, right? The underpinning of that is sports science. I think as we get more sports science in fighting, we're going to see a better athlete. That's not just nutrition, that's strength conditioning, that's psychology, exercise physiology, that's physiotherapy, all components. We're going to see better, stronger, fitter, faster fighters. I think they're going to start to realize that if I'm doing these big, huge weight cuts consistently throughout the year, even though acutely my system might be okay, my performance is probably suffering, or my performance can be X% better if I decrease the amount that I'm cutting weight and put those calories towards fueling. That is what I think we'll see. And the reason I say that is we work with a lot of athletes. Say we've got the Winter Olympics coming up next year. We're working with a lot of athletes where we're trying to find out, okay, as you're coming up to the Winter Olympics, how can you strategically manipulate your weight, maintain an optimal power to weight ratio, but then quickly get back up to here to your optimal training weight. So this ideal competition weight, we still maintain peak performance, but we're much lower, which increases your power to weight ratio. And I think this concept will transfer over to fighting, where it won't just be fight camp to fight camp. I've got to start really high, get low. It's like, okay, how can I maintain a bit lower weight, drop down to my fight weight where I can still maintain a really good performance, get up here, but I can get 6 fights in over the year and do it really, really consistently. Imagine what the UFC would look like if the biggest stars in the sport could fight 4, 5, 6 times a year. It would be a completely different sport. And the biggest hindrance, I think, to that is these guys have to go through a whole fight camp, not just to get physically and mentally ready. They have to be able to make the weight. So imagine when this comes down, I think we'll also see less weight cutting in the bath and sauna. I think that people will appreciate, you know what, I don't think it's as big of an advantage as what people perceive it. And as you alluded to earlier, that more old school mentality of, if I'm bigger than you, I'm going to be able to beat you, which I completely appreciate. I've been punched in the face by many people who are a lot bigger than me, it absolutely makes a difference. I'm not saying it doesn't. I've been thrown across the room and thrown through the floor by many people who are bigger than me. But when you get to a top level skill in a multifaceted sport such as MMA, where so many components contribute to mastering this sport, the weight is just one component of that. And once you get these athletes really focusing on all these other things, I think you're going to see, okay, less time and energy spent on weight, more time on technical mastery. We'll just see better athletes in general.
I hope so. To counter the, you've been punched in the face by bigger guys. I think of training with guys when I was about 205 pounds, and Khabib was like 170 at that point of camp, probably about 172. And again, I was a professional fighter and good at jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and I'm going with Khabib, and I'm sitting here thinking weight cuts don't matter whatsoever. Weight does not matter one little bit, because I looked like I had never trained a day in my entire life. Skills make such a huge difference. And I think that that's possible. I might be a little bit more cynical and not, I don't think it's as likely as I wish it was in the next 5 years. I certainly hope, but I think it's going to take that cultural shift starting at the top. You're going to have to see more of the Ilias, the Max Holloways, the Volkanovskis, people who are willing to go up in weight classes and still do a really good job. And people see that and have the bravery to give it a chance themselves. I think that's the only way. I think you're just going to have more champions that aren't cutting weight, large amounts of weight, before we see the difference. Because again, we're dealing with a community that's very resistant to data, even though we have the data. And I had Charles on and we talked about the fact there is no statistical evidence that larger weight cuts equal more wins or greater success. There's no evidence to support that. And there's tons of subjects for that evidence. But again, it's not going to change until I think they see it change within their own gyms and their own communities. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your point on seeing the champions move between weight classes and still dominating is going to be really important for that. Because again, I think a great example of this, maybe I'm biased because I've worked with Volk for so long, but Islam versus Jack Della Maddalena, like JDM versus Islam is going to be a very interesting one for this point, because Islam is such a technical, great grappler, but the reality is he's a lot smaller than JDM. And let's see what happens, because I've seen when Volk came up and he fought Islam is significantly bigger than Volk. But you think of that first fight when we had two full fight camps, and pound for pound number one best guy fought pound for pound number two best guy, full fight camp, and they went at it. It was one of the best fights in UFC history. But there was that weight discrepancy. So if weight really did matter that much, when you get these two guys who are number one and two, full fight camps under their belt, it should be pretty one-sided. But we're going to see it. And you look at Ilya when he just went out and fought Charles. He's gone up a weight class. If this theory holds true, Ilya shouldn't have been as dominant as what he was against Charles. But I think you're absolutely right. We're going to see these fighters bounce between these weight classes, because weight is not going to be as big of a factor in the overall performance of an MMA fight as we once thought.
Nobody wants to cut weight. Nobody enjoys it. It's just part of it. So it's going to take guys willing to walk the walk instead of just saying, I hate this, because almost every fighter says that. I wish we all just agreed to fight at a more natural weight. Why don't you just do it and see what happens? And I understand it's easier said than done, but I do think there's going to have to be more fighters walk the walk and give it a chance. And on the topic of walking the walk, I'll bring that up because it's one thing I really respect about yourself. And it's the fact that you're not just a practitioner. And I think it's important for people in our space, if you're wanting to work with athletes, you have to understand they're going to usually respond better to a coach or maybe even sometimes a teammate attitude from you than they are a clinician or a practitioner. They don't really want that at any level. And one thing that I think you do a really good job at is you walk the walk and you're a performance athlete yourself. This is why there's times I don't want to do jiu-jitsu. I don't want to keep doing it. I'm a black belt and I'm like, man, there's still times I don't enjoy it. Like I got to do it because I have to be the guy who's doing the things that I'm helping people get better at. I think it's important. And I know you do a lot of this in your own life, you know, and is that something that you do because you just consciously know that it's important to make you a better practitioner, or are you just a performance junkie?
I strongly believe that if you want to get into this arena, you need to understand what the gladiators are going through. Even if you're not a gladiator yourself, I feel no one at City Kickboxing is hiring me to be a sparring partner, but they are hiring me to give them the best nutrition for their training. And one of the biggest insights I had is when I was visiting City Kickboxing, jumping in their classes and going, okay, when I'm fueling someone for this Tuesday night wrestling class, this is really hard. This is way harder than what I do at my MMA gym back home. So I need to take that into consideration. And that's really why I continue to do it. I love sport. Don't get me wrong. All of us practitioners, if we're being really honest with ourselves, all research is me search, right? We're all failed athletes and whatever. But really, if I'm being completely honest, I love sports and I love athletes, but I've always been a science guy. I love science. I've always been someone who's obsessed with the science of performance. I've just learned to appreciate over the years that, yes, I can talk to NFL players, Aussie rules footballers over here, basketballers, but I can't connect with them in the same way as what I connect with my other athletes where I've done that sport, because I understand what they're going through. And say, even recently, I've gotten really into the ultra endurance running, not necessarily because I love going out and running for 24 hours, but you learn so much. All of these theories, I go, okay, you got to fuel yourself X, Y, and Z. It's really difficult when you're out there 18 hours in and it's freezing cold and you're on top of the mountain in altitude. It's really tough, but you don't read about that in a textbook. Yet you're going to have clients coming to you saying, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And if you want to truly get the best results, which you and I, the people and the caliber of athlete that we work with, and this is an important point, it's their livelihood. This is their livelihood. This is how they put food on the table for their kids. If they're trusting you and me to give them information to help them do that in the best way possible, we have to be able to provide the best service. And to provide the best service, I really do believe you have to understand that sport in a way that's a lot deeper than what you read in a textbook or in an academic paper.
No, I'm 100% with you. And you and I have kind of an inside joke thing on Instagram. We'll go back and forth. I'm like, oh, like, how far was that run? You'll tell me. I'm like, how many curls did you do? We'll joke around about stuff like that, because I would much rather curl than run those distances. But to put some seriousness to that, it does matter. People can say what they want. You see this a lot in the medical community, especially in America. It's like, well, it doesn't matter what they look like. It matters what they know. Like, sorry, but that's not true, because it's heal thyself. You know, it really is a thing. And I had an NFL athlete once told me the first time they met me, I step out of the car and go up and shake their hand. He was like, man, when I saw your biceps, I knew you were the guy. I'm like, and this guy's so much bigger than me, but, you know, it made me feel good. But his fact was, he's worked with a lot of practitioners. He's worked with a lot of dietitians in various forms. And he looked at me and said, wow, this guy's in shape. And that immediately got me the respect for him to trust me at that point on, because he saw that I walk the walk. And I do think that that's so important. I've said before, my cauliflower ear will get me into more rooms, athletic rooms, than my initials ever will, because they can immediately look at that ugly face and say, wow, this guy's been here and he's done that and he's felt the things that we feel. And I think there's an over-reliance on initials, and I'm guilty of it myself. In fact, as a friend, you've called me out on this before in the past. We get over-reliant and we care too much about the initials next to our name because we put the time in, you know, and it sucks. I got a master's degree that it took a long time. It was frustrating. I took this stupid exam and this long 1,200 hour internship. It's like, man, you know what? I want to trash talk everyone who didn't go through this. And honestly, I've gotten to a point, and I know you've been at this point for a while. Like, I don't really care. I just care if you're good at giving the information that you're giving, and it's good information. Because we both know there's a lot of people that call themselves a dietitian. They are a dietitian. I would say there's more than there aren't that are absolutely terrible at practicing what they preach. And if you can't practice it, you sure can't coach it. It's very, very frustrating. And I think that that's an important thing. And I would give that advice to anyone who wants to work with athletes and do what we do is first feel it, do it yourself, get in shape, be in shape, like be like bleed and sweat with these guys, the fighters, feel what that feels like. And I think that all goes back to kind of getting that buy-in that we talked about before. Would you say? I think that they need to see that. And one thing I do want to go on, what was the last race, that the crazy long race that you did?
I just did one about 4 days ago. That was a 100K race. My legs are still pretty sore, to be honest.
100 kilometers.
I think you might be
100K race.
referring to one of our clients. We were in Arizona and we did what's called the Cocodona 250, which is 250 miles through the Arizona desert, which was pretty full on.
That's no, I was talking about the 100K, but actually, I want to talk about that. What did nutrition look like for that? How many miles was it?
250.
Holy smokes. I mean, the nutrition for that can't look like ideal nutrition for everyone. You know, like people were probably really mad at the amount of ultra processed food that this guy had to consume for that. Talk a little bit about that. I don't want you to have to spend too much time on that, but talk a little bit about the nutrition strategies for that level of an endurance race.
Yeah, I think there's two important points you need to appreciate when it comes to those ultra endurance guys. Is like, one, it's a battle. It's a battle really just mentally. And for that race, for example, you had the best guys in the world. You had Courtney Dauwalter and someone you'll know, Cam Haines was out there racing it as well. So you've got the best of the best guys in the world out racing it. That sport is, everyone who reads, say, David Goggins' book gets really motivated to go out for a run. What you're looking for is you want to go out for this mental battle where it's you versus you, where it's I want to stop, but I'm going to keep putting my foot forward and I'm going to go. I don't want to run this hill, but I'm going to have this conversation with myself. I'm going to do it. Don't want to get on my pulse. That's the challenge you want. What you don't want in this sport, which unfortunately happens a lot, and it's happened to me, is where the challenge you're facing is your body shutting down, where you're quite literally, your kidneys are failing, you don't have enough fluid in your blood where your cardiovascular system works properly, your digestive system isn't working, you're throwing up. I've landed myself in the emergency room a couple times. And the reason, and I'm not bagging the guidelines or the textbook, a lot of the times when we just read and follow, say, something that's made for a general athlete or a half marathon or marathon, and we try to apply it to this sport that's far more extreme, it doesn't work. And to go back to your point, what it looks like fueling that is, firstly, it's really important to fuel that, and you need to get your hydration and nutrition right, because the challenge you want in this sport can only happen if you're well hydrated and you've got your nutrition on point. Otherwise, you're facing a battle that is just quite frankly dangerous. And I don't care how many David Goggins books you read, if you ever find yourself in that position, it's not fun. It's not a challenge that's fun. It's my life is in danger here, and this is way more serious than I thought. And I've been in that spot. But to go back to your question, you look at that and you go, okay, someone's running. This took us 111 hours to get this race done with this guy. There's no way he's going to be eating all the calories that he's burning. What we tend to think happens is they eat about 50% of the calories they're burning, but they're burning up to 10,000 calories a day. So you've still got to be eating 5,000 calories, which most people are doing on a bulking phase, but they're also doing it when they're sitting down and just working out for, say, an hour a day and then going about their day, not running and hiking through mountains for 24 hours throughout the day. So there's a real interesting challenge of how do we get this 5,000 calories in, 5, 6, 7,000 calories, whatever it is, every single day while this person's still active. And that comes back to your point of these ultra processed foods. And over the span of 5, 6 days, don't get me wrong, like I had this athlete sitting down at aid stations and we were having full meals. We were making him soups and broths and burgers and all of these like quite healthy meals, like burritos, where we're making them from Whole Foods and everything else. But when he's out there in the middle of nowhere, this guy is not carrying half of Whole Foods in his backpack and then whipping out a jet boiler and making these meals, cutting up his veggies. He's carrying some Uncrustables because they digest really quickly. They've got really simple calories in there. He's got a jar of peanut butter on him where he can just whip in and get some quick calories if he's feeling really low and we need to get it up. Those ultra processed foods are really light. They pack a lot of calories and not a lot of volume, and they work really, really well for what we're doing. And that's not me saying, hey, Tyler, if you go out for a 2-mile run, go pack a jar of peanut butter and a bag of gummy bears in there and go, hey, go smash that on your 2-mile run. Absolutely not. But when you understand the physiology and the system that you're trying to treat, Yeah, absolutely. Those foods are fantastic sources. Would I recommend that they do that every week in their training? No, absolutely not, because then they spend way too much of their time eating that type of food. But when it comes, push comes to shove in that environment, yeah, they absolutely have a place.
I like that. Last question I want to ask you, and I didn't intend to ask you this, but I think you're going to agree with me on this. And if not, that's still cool. Um, uh, on that note, carb load or not for a marathon? I say
I think
no. I'm just,
I think yes. I think yes, if your intention is to really send a marathon and you want to run a fast time, you're going to get
I
to a
say,
point where
let me say for someone just completing, if you have that, that's where I would have the caveat. If it's, I want to complete a marathon, do I need a carb load? I get that question a lot. And the question is typically like, at what level are you trying to complete this marathon and what level is your training? You know what I'm saying? But
yeah, I have this
yeah,
conversation a
give
lot.
both sides.
The best example I use with this task, say, and because we joke about this online, say I've been running, put a lot of effort into running, say the last 5 years alongside the combat sports training, but this is really good. So you're a much better fighter than what I am, and let's say I'm a bit better at running than you. So if me and you, we rock up to a gym, Tyler, and we're doing jujitsu, you rock up completely fasted. You've had a black coffee. I rock up. I've had 90 grams of carbohydrates, 40 grams of carbs. I've hydrated properly. I've had all my electrolytes. We go into the gym. We fist pump. We go. No matter what I try to pull at you, you're annihilating me. I'm getting tapped 17 times. No matter what I try to do, no matter how hard I push that pace, no matter what I do, you're destroying me because you're technically way better at that sport than me. Likewise, if you and me rock up and we go, okay, tomorrow morning we're going to do a 10-mile race and we're going to run as fast as we can. You can fuel up as much as you want, Tyler. You can have 120 grams of carbs, 60 grams of protein, all the electrolytes, the fluids. You can have some creatine, beta-alanine before and have as much caffeine as your heart desires. You rock up, you're a bouncing bunny, you go. We rock up there. I've had a black coffee, maybe a sip of water, some fresh air. I'm smoking you in that race and I'm running really, really fast. And the reason I always bring that example up is that when it comes to performance and training, us as nutritionists and dietitians love to put a lot of emphasis on nutrition, probably a bit more than what's true. What really makes an athlete great is your training. That's what's going to make you a better athlete. That's what's going to condition your body and get these adaptations to run a really long way, really, really fast. And there's plenty of marathoners I know that can rock up to a marathon and they can run at a level that is far faster than you and I because their system is so advanced that they can get away with sub-maximal fueling and really not putting a lot of effort into that because the system allows them to run at these paces and still get enough oxygen in to be able to complete that race. But for the everyday person, what you need to be focusing on is getting to your training sessions and developing that system. So if you want to run a marathon and you go, okay, I want to run a marathon in 12 weeks, you go, okay, for you to do that and to complete that distance, you have to train and you have to get so many training sessions in every week. You have to recover, blah, blah, blah. Your nutrition is going to be important for you to turn up to every single one of those sessions. If I say, hey, Tyler, go for a 20-mile long run, the nutrition may not be the make or break whether you get through that 20-mile long run, but it may make it a lot easier for you to get through. Getting carbohydrates throughout will make it perceptually a lot easier. If you're trying to hit a pace that's a lot higher, we know that we can do that with carbohydrates. We know if we're fueling you with carbohydrates that your muscle breakdown is going to be lower. So then when I say, hey, on Sunday, Tyler, go out for a 10-mile recovery run, you don't get out of bed and go, oh my God, I'm so sore. Your nutrition is what allows you to get up and do that again. And then I go, hey, Tyler, on Monday, then you've got to do your intervals, blah, blah, blah. That's where your nutrition comes in and is really, really, really important. Carb loading is really important if you're trying to perform at a certain level. If I think it is important, best practice wise, I'd probably argue the null and say no matter where you're at, it's probably worth doing. I do take a lot of issue with people who say I need a carb load, say for 2, 3, 4 days or anything like that. You can absolutely do a 24-hour carb load. You can fully maximize your glycogen stores and you can be really good. I have found in the running community, carb loading can be a bit of a crux and an excuse to just give yourself permission to eat foods that you probably know you shouldn't be eating for an extended period of time that doesn't really affect your performance in any positive way. I do think carb loading is really important. Second to that, I've had this big load, especially with our ultra guys, is yes, carb loading is important, but yeah, getting the glycogen. But is there a component of that where if I'm going out with this guy for 4 or 5 days and we're going to go into this energy ditch where we're only being able to replace 50% of his calories, is there merit in then overcompensating calories in the 2-3 days leading up where we're going into almost positive energy availability, knowing we're going to come down? And I've definitely seen that in our ultra endurance guys. Are you going to get to that point in a 26-mile marathon? I don't think so. But different shakes.
No, absolutely. And the problem that I see with a lot of people is they'll ask me this question, and I like that we separated that. I should have probably asked the question in two different things. The average person is coming to me and they'll ask, should I carb load for this marathon? I'm like, hey, what have your calories and carbs looked like to begin with? And so many people, especially your weekend warriors, they just want to run one, or maybe it's their second or third one. They just want to do a little bit better. Like, the first thing you should have been doing is not been in a deficit throughout your entire training for this marathon. Because I do think a lot of people, they look at this marathon as part of their fat loss phase. They'll schedule something, and I talk about this a lot. We talked about this on your podcast when I was a guest, that nutrition goals exist on a pyramid, a triangle, and you have aesthetics, body composition, you have performance, and you have health and longevity. Complete a marathon is a performance goal. Now, there's aspects of health to that, but they'll be aggressively going towards this aesthetics goal, weight loss. And I'm trying to be in this huge deficit. I'm trying to lose 1 to 2 pounds a week, but I want to get this time on a marathon. I'm like, well, the protocol to get here looks way different than the protocol to get here. So can we spend some time not aggressively going towards one of those? And I see that a lot of people would have done far better to not worry about carb loading in the days before the marathon and just been getting adequate carbs for the 12 to 20 weeks they were actually preparing for the marathon, because they were severely under fueling for that. Have you seen that too? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree, absolutely agree, because a lot of people will come and then say, I want to lose this weight, I'm going to train for a marathon, and then underfuel. And like I said, if you're underfueling, you're not then developing the system that's allowing you to perform in that marathon. I think it's, just to get any ambiguity out, carb loading absolutely does work for a marathon. It absolutely does. If you take two people, one's, not carb loaded, one's carb loaded, assuming they're both pretty well carb adapted, the guy that's carb loaded is going to probably perform a lot better than that person. But like you said, we see that all the time. And to the counter, I guess to your point, in a different angle, we have a lot of people come for their marathon prep and then end up gaining weight because they go, oh, you know what? I need to fuel a lot for this training and running. And take it from me, I've done lots of different sports. I've done fighting, I've done rugby, I've got into high rocks lately, I've done weightlifting, I've done marathon training. Marathon training is hard, but calorically, you're not going to be burning a crazy amount of calories. And this is a mistake that people make, is they mistake the fatigue and your central nervous system and your muscles adapting to this movement and just pounding pavement, the same muscles over and over again, for being extremely malnourished, which isn't always correlated. It can be, but then some people will go, hey, Tyler, I'll come to you and I'll say, Tyler, I just ran 20 miles. I'm so sore. I'm really fatigued. I'm going to eat my way out of this. And for sure, you absolutely have to eat to recover, and you've got to put good fuel back in your body. But I don't need to be going to Chipotle and nailing 3 burritos and then go and get a pizza and then a thick shake and then fries as well, and then giving myself 12,000 calories for a 20-mile run. That's a mistake we often see. And that tends to be because people have this idea of, I need to get all these carbs in to really perform. Carbs are super important, don't get me wrong. But as you said, fueling your body properly and nourishing your body is just as important.
Well, man, the cool thing about this, like the ultra marathon endurance world, is it's kind of a completely different world than MMA as far as that goes. Like different fueling systems, different training methodologies, everything about it is very different. But I do find a lot of the same mistakes in the amateur, because the cool thing about a marathon is, and I've told people, we were not created, evolved, whatever you believe, 26 miles should not bury us. In fact, that's the only reason we've been able to go from continent to continent. Is that's kind of a primal pattern that we're able to do. We should be able to go distances. It really shouldn't bury us, but we've just devolved and deconditioned ourselves to the point that completing a marathon has become a goal. And I think it's huge. I think that's great, especially if this is the first feat you've done is complete a marathon. I think it's awesome. It's such a goal such a good goal to have, but it should be something that I believe that we should the way we're fueling ourselves just in our day-to-day life for optimal health and performance should be able to get us through it to the finish line. And I do think that it's important, as you said, when you're looking at amateur versus high level when it comes to this. And that is the thing with these races. You'll see people from all walks of life and all levels. And I know for myself, I used to do a lot of like 5Ks, 10Ks, and some half marathons. And I remember doing my best and then seeing the time of the guy who's really freaking good at this and his best and thinking, nope, I could never, I can't even relate to the ability to complete that task. It's a fascinating thing, but man, I'm going to cut this just because, dude, we could talk all day, and I want to have another one of these down there, maybe at the beginning of next year, where we kind of have a circle of this. Maybe you, Charles, Dolce, we all get on and have a conversation where we just underdo this. We could probably have a 2-hour textbook in audio form of us just discussing what to do here. So I do want to leave, dude, I have a list here of like 10 more questions that we didn't even get to. But I do want to leave room on the table to further carry those out. But I do highly encourage anyone, especially weight cut athletes, endurance athletes, follow you on Instagram. It's the Fight Dietitian, because you put out all kinds of really good information, which I think is important. And me and Charles touched on this previous, that one of the things we all wanted to change, and he said me and you were the first ones to kind of come out that he saw and did this, was stop gatekeeping information. Put the information out there so that anyone can start to learn from this. And I don't think there's really anyone who does this better than you. So I think that's really cool. And I encourage people to follow you. But again, man, I know it's really early where you're at on the far south, other side of the globe. So I appreciate you getting on. And man, this was fun for me.
No, I appreciate it. Maybe you, me, Charles, and Dolce, we can find a sport none of us have ever done, and we'll spend 16 weeks doing that sport, and we'll document how we feel, and then we'll have a round table about it. But yeah, I appreciate getting on Tyler. It's always good.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. See ya. I want to thank you guys for watching, and also a word of thanks to our sponsors who have made this episode possible. All I ask is that you guys please hit the like and subscribe button, as it helps the podcast grow, and so we can continue to bring on some great guests for you guys. I'll see you in the next one.